I'll probably have another retreat, online retreat, maybe in May sometime. So the thing I'd like to speak about today, there's this issue that a lot of people have with Kundalini, and the scientific term for it might be called brain fog. But when someone is going through Kundalini awakening, it's not really brain fog what they're experiencing. Kundalini is attempting to make your consciousness more expansive and spacious. So Kundalini is wanting to awaken you. When one is awake, the experience of being awake is knowing oneself as space. So it's a shift in identity from, the ego thought in identity is, I am my thoughts, I am my memories, I am this brain and all the mental activity that's in my brain. And when you're in your egoic consciousness, it seems like there's this one almost like consistent stream of thought that's all kind of piled together. And that thing is you. That thing is you. Now, from a spiritual awakening perspective, you say, that's not what I am. That is my conditioning. From an egoic perspective, you are your education, you are your memories, you are your past, you are the genetics in your body and how that's played out, and it's made the body in the form that you are. So there's this identification with the body, with the mind. And what's the mind? It's its memories, its beliefs, its conditioning, its education. And 99.9% of the people on planet Earth, they think that this is what I am. Now, in the realm of spiritual awakening, we know ourselves as this awake, aware presence. So awareness is spacious, presence is spacious, the soul is spacious and timeless and eternal, even though the soul incarnates into the world of time. The heart, when we truly feel into and open into the heart, is a spacious radiance. But right now, I'd like to focus just on the experience of Kundalini in the mind. So when Kundalini rises up through the central channel, what it often does is it begins to put pressure on the human personality, the human thinking mind, the brain. And when this pressure first starts to happen, it can be very disorienting. It can lead to kriyas and these kind of things where we're opening and shutting our eyes and squeezing our teeth, as this energy. Basically, it's a light that's coming up the spine into the space of the mind. It's creating a sense of pressure on all the things that are false, that are not the truth of what we are. All the things that are our conditioned sense of self is going to put some pressure on that. And then it's going to want to expand our mind open. So the direct experience of our mind is spacious. The way the Buddha describes it is sky-like. Sky-like 360 awareness. And when this first happened with me, it's like, oh my God, felt like the entire sky was in my head, that my head was the sky. It was very disorienting and very confusing. Now I'm just going to rattle off some of the list of symptoms and complaints that people have. One, it just tends to be very disorienting, and from I'll say it like this, from a psychonaut perspective, like from a psychedelic perspective, like people who explore those types of medicines or those type of experiences, those types of drugs, depending on your orientation. You can feel really high. You can feel really euphoric, feel really expansive. It can be wondrous. And like, again, when this happened to me, I thought it was lovely. It's like, oh my God, like this is incredible. I love being space. I love being empty. I love the freedom and the euphoria that came with it. Because the thoughts in my head that were making up my personality at that moment in history were terrible thoughts. They were thoughts where I was trying to hold my life together. I thought I was the doer. I thought I had to save my family. I thought I had to save my marriage. I had a business that was failing. I was trying so hard to be a good spiritual student so I could awaken. So I was trying to be something different than what I was. There was all this efforting. There's all these things that I could not control. And I was trying to control them. This is normal egoic consciousness. So when we live in a state of normal egoic consciousness, it creates a great contraction, like a feeling of contraction, denseness. There's this feeling like there's this thing up in your head that's just trying to control life. And, we usually fail at this. Sometimes we have some degree of imagined success when things go our way, and some degree of realistic failure when things don't go our way. But as the Kundalini comes into the mind and it expands it open in every direction, and there's great freedom in that. Great freedom. If you're willing just to roll with it. Now, a lot of people, when their mind starts to expand, they go on Google and they start Googling and, their symptoms. I've lost my memory. Oh, if you Google that, it's probably going to, you'll be on WebMD site for dementia or for a head injury, or something terrible. And so, it might say, oh, you have COVID and this is a symptom of long COVID. It's called brain fog or whatever. And it's like, we can really get lost in the realm of Googling symptoms when we're going through this experience. So I'm going to read some off. I wrote them down. I want you to imagine if one day you wake up and your past is gone. In order for your past to be gone, it's your memory. It has been dissolved. Your memory has been dissolved. And because your mind is blown open, it's almost like a computer. If you start to take a computer apart, it's not going to be able to process information any longer until you put it back together. And what Kundalini is doing is first, it might take your mind apart, and then it puts it back together later on down the line. But you might not be able to read. You might get your words mixed up. You might have some kind of dyslexic symptoms. You might have trouble thinking, trouble spelling, trouble remembering names. You might feel just a huge expanse of nothingness in your head. And if your head was once filled with trauma, with pain, or a really constricted, controlling nature, and you thought that nature was you, I am the controlling one. None of us say this out loud, but that's what the egoic consciousness thinks, is I am the controlling one. I am the doer. I'm the one who efforts. I'm the one who fears. I'm the one who's sad. And if you can imagine just waking up one day and the thing within you that controls, that does life is gone. And in its place is this great spaciousness. Then maybe you pick up a book. You're like, gosh, I just can't read. I can't connect to this. And let's have some fun. It's like April 15th. You're trying to do your taxes. And you're like, I can't find the place within me that does numbers. Again, this can be very disconcerting to anyone who has this experience. Now, I can assure you that mental capacities will come back online a little bit later down the road. But sometimes when we're blasted wide open, the thing that God is doing to us is trying to expand our consciousness and simultaneously empty us out and reorient who and what you know yourself to be. So again, we go from knowing ourselves as a fixed egoic personality. And if you think back to when you were a teenager, a lot of us when we were teenagers, we thought we were our hair. We thought we were our hair, and I'll smile at that now. And I can even tell you just with a little bit of humor here. Like when I was young, when I was 14 years old, as an act of rebellion, I grew, my father wanted me to join the military. So I showed him by growing long hair and dreadlocks. And then my little brother followed, he followed right behind me, grew long hair and dreadlocks. These two wild looking hippies who grew up in this military family. My dad lost his mind. And I can remember him and my younger brother were fighting. My dad used to do this funny thing. We had a couple family cars, and one was a 1973 VW Super Beetle. So that was a car that I got to drive, and I drive it to work and into school. And one day I went out in the morning to go start the car, and it didn't start. I was like, what the hell? Like, Dad, you know what's going on with the car? And he's like, yeah, get a haircut and I'll tell you. My little brother started screaming at him. And so my little brother and my dad are fighting again. Like we were deeply entrenched as teenagers, that we wear our hair, we wear our clothes, we wear our music, like our conditioning was what we were. And we are our reactivity. So basically our behavior was a sense of rebellion. And it wasn't even that we were choosing it. It was just happening through us, just an egoic rebellion to his authoritarianism. And so my brother, my dad said, cut your hair. My brother held onto his hair, and then he said, this hair is who and what I am. If I cut this, it's cutting my soul. And again, like this is us being deeply entrenched in our egoic identity. Now, a monk does this funny thing. A monk will shave his head, because he's, it's an attempt to show, like, I don't believe that I am this body. I don't believe I'm this body. And so I can cut my hair. I can wear the same robes as everyone else. I don't need to be anything special. Because the experience of what I am is awareness. Awareness is awake, aware, it's vast, and it's free. It's timeless, it's deathless, it's sky-like. The sky doesn't really have an identity. Its identity is space, and to call that an identity is hard. It's hard. You call your music your identity, and your car your identity, and your job your identity, and your age, and everyone's into gender now. My gender is my identity. Gender is not your identity. Your age is not your identity. From a spiritual perspective. So Kundalini is trying to open you into being this timeless, deathless space. And when it blasts you and your attachment to your human computer, which is your brain, as it blasts that wide open, sometimes some things become collateral damage. I want to say this, for a short period of time. A short period of time. And so I've noticed this funny dance within my experience, that right as God, right as Kundalini is wanting to expand my consciousness, I start losing the ability to read anything. And this has happened to me like 6 times. And like the first time it happened, it went on for about 3 years where I could barely read anything. I could, if I like really needed to, I'd have to like consciously put on my thinking cap and, try to focus and I could read. But there were times when I couldn't touch a book. I couldn't touch a magazine article. I just couldn't touch anything. It was just, there was so much space in the place where there was normally like this concentrated thinking type of mental activity. And because I'm a trusting person, like I smiled and I thought it was kind of funny. I didn't worry about it too much. But it also made me a little bit dyslexic. And, it was a little humiliating when at times I'd get my kids' names mixed up or couldn't remember the name of my dog, or sometimes I'd point at the car and I'd say the word motorcycle or fork. And again, things can get a little strange, and we can call it brain fog, and Google that and start thinking we have dementia, or we can take some deep breaths and trust and give it a little bit of time and space. And of course, the more you get yourself grounded, what you find is the more grounded you become, then these capacities come back online again. They come back online. The most bizarre one was the falling away of my memory. What I found is that it seemed like there was no memory that was available to me. And again, it's very hard not to be in the present moment if you don't have a memory and you're not reaching for the future. So you say that differently, like you're always in the present moment if you don't have a memory. And so there's this beautiful gift of being here in the freshness and the aliveness of the present moment. But people who have, hara and the solar plexus have a power imbalance there, who have a lot of fear there. Again, this can be quite disconcerting. We might say, I have dementia, that's what's going on. I have Alzheimer's, I have a brain injury, I have long COVID. And again, we just start making things up as a way of explaining this, to try to get some grip on reality. When what life is trying to do is to take you into a different type of reality. A different type of reality, which is timeless and eternal. Timeless and eternal. And so, this happened. And then what I noticed is with my memory, if there was something I needed to know or remember from the past, if I gave it a little time and space, that thing would come forward. That thing would come forward. I gave it a little bit of time and space, that thing would come forward. And then I found again, like the more grounded I became, like anything I needed to know, God would bring it forward in my consciousness just like that. So then it started to come very quickly. But also in all my downtime, when I didn't need to know anything, my mind was very empty and just has stayed empty to this day. To this day. I was talking to my wife this weekend, and I said something like, she asked me a question. I said, well, I don't know. I don't really think about that. I don't like think in that way. And she just almost laughed out loud. She's like, yeah, you don't think at all. I was like, yeah, I don't think at all. I don't think much. I don't think much. Whereas in the past, my mind was always thinking, fighting, striving, tripping over something, wanting, grasping at something. And as Kundalini comes into your mind and blasts that all open, there's a great relief. There's a great peace that's in the space of the mind. But this peace is only available if we trust that what's happening is something good, and it's a process of awakening. It's one of the experiences of awakening, one of the qualities of awakening is spaciousness, is timelessness. And I'll say a little bit more Sometimes our relationship with time can get very strange. Whereas the ego, when it has thought after thought after thought after thought, and it's holding, and it's grasping, it's always watching the clock. It has a very clear and heavy and dense sense of time. But as our mind is blown open, the difference between what happened 2 hours ago, what happened 10 years ago, and what happened yesterday, it all merges into a great nothingness, a great expansiveness. Where it's like, did that happen yesterday? Or did that happen 10 years ago? Did that happen at all? Because the other thing too about this sense of spaciousness, it brings you into the timeless, eternal present moment to such a degree that everything feels fresh and new and alive. And I can tell you this, like sometimes I'll look at my child, my dog, or my wife, and I'll fall in love with them again, because when I see them, sometimes I look at them, I'm like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. Oh my God, look at you. And it's as if I'm seeing them new and fresh for the first time. It's new and fresh for the first time. And, you know, it happens in all kinds of silly ways. I had this funny experience yesterday of I drove my van and I was like fully present in my van. And then, you know, actually I dropped it off at my mechanic friend's house, and he had my other car. And so then I got in my other car and I was like, oh my God, like, look at this car. This car is so nice. It just felt so new and fresh. And, you know, it's a 2013 Toyota. It's not a brand new Mercedes-Benz. It's just, it's a 10-year-old car. And I thought, it's so new and so nice to drive this. What a pleasure it is to drive this. And it's just like when you're in your ego and you have a strong sense of the past, or if you're always grasping at the future, you're never here in the present experiencing life. And anytime you're in the present with your ego, it's comparing it to the past, comparing it to the future, grasping at something, striving, fighting. And so again, you're not really living. Not really living. And so I can tell you, you know, with a smile, that like my ability to read came back online, and then it was taken away again, and then it's brought back online. Right now, I'm currently in a stage where I can read, and that may disappear tomorrow. And if that happens, I trust in it. I smile with it, and I say, that's okay. My ability to do math, I still struggle with that one. But luckily, I have a 8-year-old in the house. And so I'm doing 3rd grade math with her, helping her with her homework. And it helps to bring that part of that, you know, part of my consciousness back online. And again, like, we could acknowledge this can be very inconvenient, or we can take a deep breath and we can smile and trust in God's plan, in God's wisdom, and simultaneously enjoy the energies of spaciousness and freedom as a direct result of Kundalini awakening. Now, unfortunately, most people don't do that. Instead of enjoying the space that's here and allowing that spaciousness to expand and change the very fabric of their consciousness, many people instead get very frightened of this. And they say, I'm losing grip on reality. I must be spinning into dementia. And while it is true that the ego is losing its grip on reality, if you trust and just notice, is there something here that's in its place? And you might begin to see, oh yeah, there's a ever-present sense of spacious aliveness that is awake and aware. And awake awareness doesn't have a grip on reality. That which is awake and aware is reality. Reality is spacious. It's vast and free. And as you open in this way, there's this greater level of intelligence that can be downloaded into your consciousness, that can begin to think through you, act through you, live through you. And now we start opening into the realm of enlightenment, where we let go of human intelligence. We walk into a world of space, we get comfortable with space. And eventually a divine intelligence begins to come through us and think through us, live through us, and act through us. And that's a whole different kind of experience, a whole